Welcome to Depth of Field, an independent filmmaking podcast hosted by Dr. Mike White and Shelby Haggerton, independent filmmakers and industry professionals. Episodes will touch on recent films, the state of the industry, the regional scene in Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota, the occasional gear discussion, and interviews. Stay up to date with our current episodes on Spotify and YouTube.
Hello and welcome to the October edition of the Depth of Field podcast. I am Dr. Mike White.
And I am Shelby Haggerton.
And first of all, for those who have not yet noticed, we have went ahead and changed from twice a month to once a month. Mm-hmm. We had this kind of discussion before. I got into a kind of a fairly intensive program at UCLA in the professional program in screenwriting, and I'm crazy busy. And beyond that, of course, we're still working on distribution of our last feature and planning the next feature. And Shelby's doing an extraordinary amount of writing on top of that too. And we're just crazy busy, and I'm sorry guys, we can only squeeze in one episode a month, but it's going to be a long episode. So trust us, it's going to be awesome. Yes. We have a terrific interview with our friend Jude Rawlins, who's just an absolutely dynamite guy. And also we have some updates today. We're going to talk to Shelby a little bit about the success of one of her scripts. We're going to talk about 3 different festivals, just reviews after attending and how much fun it was. A very brief, not even a review, but just an update on one of the Laowa lenses, the Laowa Proteus. Then we are going to talk about where we're going to be in November a little bit. Yep. So why don't we get started? So Shelby, tell us about the script that you have and how it's performing.
I currently have a script out in competition called Faces of Lilith. Mm-hmm. It's performed a lot better than I expected.
She's being modest. This is a second round pick for the Austin Film Festival. So you're going to Austin.
I am going to Austin. So at the end of October, I will be headed to Austin, actually next week. Mm-hmm. And when I get back, I'm actually going to do a review of the Austin Film Festival. So stay tuned for that. I think it'll be a lot of fun. A lot of great films.
And how long do you plan to be in Austin?
I'll be there for 5 days.
5 days. And I can't go. I have to teach at the college and I can't go. So she's going on her own.
So it'll be 5 days of fun at the Austin Film Festival, seeing lots of great films. Virgil Williams will be there. A lot of great writers.
And you're going to try to get a seat for Nickel Boys, aren't you?
I am definitely going to try to get a seat for Nickel Boys. So.
2 big films, right? Anora and Nickel Boys. And I know Anora,
Anora won't be there.
It's not screening there.
Nope.
But Nickel Boys is.
The piano lesson is.
Yeah. And all the stuff after New York Film Festival is on Anora and Nickel Boys. All the writers went bananas for those 2 films.
Also, Jesse Eisenberg's film, which I've been really excited about.
That's right.
Real Pain. That's going to be there too.
That's
thrilled to see that film.
That's right. And they just had Film at Lincoln Center podcast just had a review with Jesse Eisenberg on that. And it's actually very entertaining. It's pretty funny.
Jesse's a great writer. I'm really excited.
And a clever guy. He's very quick-witted. So it's pretty cool. So that is something I wanted to bring up too. With New York Film Festival ending, if you are a podcast listener, if you have any kind of commute at all, you should really listen to Film at Lincoln Center. Film at Lincoln Center, now that New York Film Fest is over, has got a bazillion episodes for you to listen to. And, just listening to directors and thoughts and process and stuff is super good. So don't miss Film at Lincoln Center. It's a must listen to podcast.
For sure.
Really for people who are serious about making serious independent cinema, I think. So,
but other than that, though, my script currently is on the red list. It is the top 20 fantasy features. It's also the top 8 of all fantasy projects on Coverfly, and in the top 10% of all Coverfly scripts.
Yes.
Just all the scripts.
But you're no stranger to success with screenplays, so that's great. I think the next phase should be the blacklist for this, because I think it's worth
so.
The time.
I'd like to do some revisions of it and take some of the notes that I've received, do some revisions. I've had a lot of people say that they think that it could be something, so it's a little bit of a different world. It's a lot of fantasy, but I think it's fun. I think it's something that's different.
Well, and I also think too, from like the standpoint of like process, I think with films, you look at like, let's do a festival, see, is it a top 50 festival? Is it a top 10 festival? And if it performs really well.
It's a similar process with scripts.
Sure it is.
It's, you put them into competitions, you see how it goes, you get your feedback. And because that's one of the things is the most honest feedback you're going to get is in a festival where nobody knows you.
Yeah.
And can send you what their thoughts.
Well, in high performance at Austin and on the red list is probably a sign that you should probably go to the blacklist next. I will be waiting with bated breath to see
what happens.
To see what happens.
We'll see.
We attended some great festivals. We actually tried out. We hosted a little bit, which was a new thing for us. But I want to talk first about
not so much a new thing for you.
Not for me.
If you're a student, submit to the Wildcat Spirit
Film Festival, right? So we just found out that Andrew Kittlinger is going to be our special guest at Wayne State College for the Wildcat Spirit Film Festival. He just just directed the last film produced by Sylvester Stallone. Mm-hmm. And that picture is called Lost on a Mountain in Maine, based on the novel. So it's going to be totally cool. And he's a great guy. Yeah, I mean, he had Tater Tot and Patton a few years ago.
And he's from South Dakota.
Yeah. He was born in Madagascar. I think it's Madagascar.
Born in Madagascar and then grew up in South Dakota.
Yeah, and then grew up in South Dakota.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He's got a really cool background. He's a really interesting guy.
Yeah, he's a really interesting guy. I think he went to Boston, right?
Yeah,
he went to BU. He went to BU.
Yeah, because that's what we bonded over.
Yeah,
I went to Emerson.
So that's really cool. So he's a totally cool guy. And anyway, we're really excited to have him, and we're going to have a collegiate event as part of that. So it sounds like Shelby's going to teach a writing workshop. Also, too, we're going to have Andrew there to go ahead and do some teaching, and then we're going to, I hope, we can screen one of his films and then do a talk back. We're working on that.
Should be fun.
Should be really crazy fun.
But we did just wrap our festival, the Depth of Field Fest, back in September.
And it was a purposefully small festival.
Yeah, we wanted to try it out and see how it went.
We sent out like one announcement that's like, please submit your film. Yeah, and then
just to see what would happen.
Well, and we didn't want to get overwhelmed because we hadn't done it and we wanted to see if anybody was interested. And it actually went crazy well.
Yeah.
We had tons of people show up and the screenings were all good.
And everyone was wonderful. Good talkbacks.
The workshops were like 3/4 full and it was like really, really fun. And we had a blast. So we are planning to do the Depth of Field Festival next year. And it's going to be Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota. We're going to accept features. And it was just so much fun. And I have to admit, it was mostly filmmakers and aspiring filmmakers, which is what we were about. Mm-hmm. We didn't really want to make, I mean, we love fans, but we wanted to make something that was really more filmmaker centric. Yeah. So it was really cool. And it was such a fun day. But
we ended up having a lot of fans come though too. In Sioux City, which was cool.
Yeah, which was really cool. Just
people that wanted to check out independent cinema. So
and we love it.
I love that.
Great. So it was super good. I want to talk really about the Iowa Independent Film Festival. Mm-hmm. And that's in Mason City and Clear Lake.
We had so much fun.
Holy smokes. It was a blast.
Also, Mason City is a beautiful town.
Mason City, underrated. That town is awesome. Beautiful town.
For sure.
Yeah. And they have all these prairie school style architecture there. The only operating Frank Lloyd Wright hotel in the world is there. So if you dig architecture,
definitely
go. You can't miss it. Yeah. It's fantastic. They had a dynamite Chinese restaurant there. It was really crazy fun. And the talkbacks were terrific and the films were good. We saw one of the best films we'd seen all year at Iowa Independent. It was called Stockton to Table Rock. It was a feature and it doesn't have distribution, which is driving me crazy. It's so good.
It's a fantastic film.
And you know what? The filmmakers were so sweet and they came to us the night before and they was like, oh, we loved your film. And they were talking to us and then we saw their film. We're like, I don't know why you're talking about our film because your film was awesome.
I really recommend
so good.
Give them a follow online because it'll help boost their film and boost their following. It was filmed by Lower Gentry Studios, and we'll put the little information down there. But it's just at Lower Gentry Studios. So
awesome.
Follow them because they're great. They're fantastic filmmakers.
Awesome.
And they're based out of Idaho.
Awesome.
So
yeah, just no other description. Yeah, there's absolutely fantastic. So that festival was good. It's put on by Jim Brocon and the clan over there, and they always do a good job. If you don't know Jim's an absolutely dynamite guy. He's head of the Iowa Motion Picture Association. So just a super duper event.
We had a really
terrific.
Good time.
Oh yeah, it's a can't miss it. Also, another event that we went to, 5 stars, Flatwater Film Festival.
Yeah, Flatwater's always good.
It was great. This was
consistently gets better.
This one was great. It was really super fun. We had a lecture on distribution, packed, elbow to elbow. And then also too, we had, I got to be on the director's roundtable this year.
Look at you.
Look at me. I'd never got to do it. It was very fun. So I got to be in the director's roundtable this year, and it was crazy fun. And, everybody was really, really nice.
And the after party after was awesome. We met so many great people. We saw some really good stop motion movies, some really good animators there too.
And everybody was so sweet and so nice. And awesome. It is like, no egos, not competitive, no egos, none of that. Everybody was just so cool and so sweet and so nice.
Well,
it was
that's
so
part
fun.
of it too, because it is non-competitive.
Oh yeah.
As there's not that my film's better than your film. It's like, well, it's art, it's subjective, it's okay. We can all just be here and enjoy each other and have a good time.
And the town is great.
Yeah.
The town is great. It's an adorable little town. We've talked about this before.
It's so cute.
Really idyllic little town, great restaurants and stuff. Crazy fun. So
before we move past,
yes,
I do want to mention too, at Iowa Independence, we did win Critics' Choice.
We did.
Yes.
I forgot. Yes, we did. We did win the Critics' Choice Award at Iowa Independent for The Cross. So if you haven't seen it, see it. We're having a little bit of trouble with our Tubi sitch, but don't worry. We're getting it resolved. We had kind of a thing with Tubi, which is getting resolved. So if you're eagerly waiting for Tubi, give me a little bit more time. Yeah, I got a little sitch, but we're working it out. Love our friends at Tubi. Love them. They're our friends, but we got some stuff we got to fix. So we're going to get that taken care of.
Nothing serious.
Also wanted to go ahead and talk about a technical thing.
Yes.
And Shelby's not a real technical person, but she thought this was coolest thing ever.
So if I think it's cool,
yes,
I think it's probably pretty cool.
So I want to talk about Laowa lenses a little bit. Love the Laowa lenses, and they have an anamorphic series that zooms, a cinema anamorphic series that zooms. If you don't know what an anamorphic lens is, anamorphic technology was developed for French tanks during, I think, the First World War, I think. But they have a piece of arched glass, either the front, the center, or the back. And there's three types of anamorphic, like front anamorphic, center, and rear. These are center anamorphic. And what the real difference is the bokeh, or like that light that arcs across the screen. Mm-hmm. Its size is kind of different, and how it bokehs is kind of different based on the placement of the glass.
Yep.
Also in anamorphic lenses, the flare can have different colors. So like it can be blue, it can be silver. It can also be the brown color with the amber, mm-hmm. right? So there's different ones. But they're crazy expensive. Anamorphic lenses are a lot of money, especially zoom anamorphic lenses.
Yeah.
So what has happened is they have created a series called the Proteus Flex 2. This is a ×2 anamorphic. So like if you're working on cameras that are large, like let's say you're going to work on a large body Sony, like a 6, or you're going to go ahead and you're going to work on like one of the Ursa series, like a 4, 6, or 12. And you're going to have a full size sensor on there. A 2x anamorphic is pretty native. We have 1.5s at the college, and they work great. And matter of fact, I've got 2 teams out right now shooting with them as we speak. But and they're awesome. The cool thing about this, and you have to look this up, the Flex 2, they come apart. So you have the lens, and then the center anamorphic piece, which has got the glaze on it, which makes it the different color, can be removed and changed. So if you have a set of lenses, all you have to do is get a different color element. So if you have one set of lenses, you can actually go ahead and switch the colored element from one to another. It's the coolest thing you've ever seen. So maybe it's like, well, genius. Yeah, I've got a set of lenses and I have the blue flare, but I need the silver flare. You can buy just the silver flare element and use it on your lenses. Yep. So it's the coolest thing you've ever seen. So
it's kind of like getting 3 lenses in one.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. So they're expensive.
I'm so surprised it didn't happen earlier. I think that's the thing. I saw it and I'm like, this just seems like common sense to me.
Yeah, but I think
it just makes sense.
Yeah, but I think so much like people love those. Like my students love the front anamorphics that have the really long bokeh on them.
But I mean, for that accessibility.
For the accessibility. Oh yeah.
It just I'm like, well, that makes.
But it does have a
Yeah.
limitation is that the bokeh is not incredibly long.
Of course.
But I mean, it's really cool.
You can only control so much.
It's awesome though. But I mean, just the idea.
It's beautiful. It's genius.
Oh, and
you should definitely look up the reviews of them.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's unscrewing it.
They're shipping.
Change it, and that's it.
Getting ready to ship now. The Laowa Ranger lenses, which are like the DZO lenses, they're awesome.
Yeah,
they're awesome. Really high performance lenses, all metal casing.
We use DZO.
Built like a rock star. We've always used DZO and we've loved them. We've used Zeiss too.
Yeah,
we've used Zeiss and then DZO, and now the next picture is going to be on the Laowa. Mm-hmm. The Laowa Anamorphic Cinema Zoom, which is they were awesome, but they're not. None of this is cheap.
No,
though.
But I do think though that like this set makes the anamorphic flair and being able to control the colors a little bit more accessible to the indie filmmaker.
Oh,
which is nice. Expensive, but still more accessible than it has been in the past.
The Laowa Cinema Zooms, the anamorphic Cinema Zooms, I think are $6,000 for the set. Two
Something
lenses,
like
it's about $3,000 a piece, and then but these lenses, the Proteus, $10,000.
Yeah,
but I mean,
but you're
might be worth it.
Getting a lot.
You get a lot, yeah. And it'll be stuff too. But they're an up and coming lens company, and I'll be honest, I think they're starting to charge more because you know how that goes.
Yep.
As they get bigger and better, they charge more and more and more, you know? So, I mean, what's the expression? You date your camera and marry your glass. So if you need glass, you might want to consider it. So one of those things. Awesome. But one other thing, Shelby and I will be at the Cedar River Film Festival. And that is in Cedar Falls. Mm-hmm. It's at a beautiful little cinema there. Our screening is kind of an odd time. It's going to be on that Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday morning.
It'll be,
There's we're in a group of some other historical films as well. So it'll be that Sunday morning. So
they decided to put us in with the historical films, which we're okay with.
Yeah.
That's going to be, people. Yeah, we're cool. So that's going to be November 3rd. Yep. If you want to come, we would love to see you and everything too. Side note, there's a fantastic little French bakery a block away.
Okay, here's the thing about the food in Cedar River.
Yeah.
There's really good French patisserie there. Fantastic.
They have
coffee.
Fantastic croissants, and they have fantastic almond croissants.
Yes. The almond croissants?
And these almond cookies.
Yes.
Those almond cookies are so good. My daughter, who lived there for a while, I would request those almond cookies like as a gift because they're that good. They're fantastic.
There's also another good coffee shop, I think across the street from the theater somewhere. It's like an odd...
Yeah, it's on the corner. It's really
odd
good.
Little coffee shop. There's a big mannequin in it. You can't miss it. It's cool.
And they have a European chocolaterie across too.
I was just going to get to that. The European chocolaterie.
Like really European style chocolate made like crazy, unreal.
And if you like record stores, there's really good record stores out there.
Really good record store. Lots of
good.
indie punk and stuff like that too.
Fun.
So it's really cool. So
recommend.
Yeah. And the town is adorable.
Yeah.
So go. It's
Come
awesome.
for the town.
Come for the town. Well, this has been awesome, and we want to apologize for the very long episode today because we also have a long interview with Jude. But Jude's so cool.
We had a lot of updates, and Jude's cool.
Jude's so cool. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So we're going to move on to segment 2, and we will see you guys in November. All right, on the next segment of the Depth of Field podcast, we have a friend, Jude Rawlins. Now, we're online friends. We've never met Jude in person, but we're going to rectify that. And our dear friend Rob Merritt was on set with us, and he said, knowing how much I love European cinema and these kinds of things, and Shelby too, Rob would always say, "You've got to meet Jude. You've got to meet Jude." And he would say it all the time to us.
He kept sending us interviews.
Yeah.
Saying, listen to this interview. Read this interview that Jude did. You're going to love him.
Yeah. And then it turned out that Jude and I have a mutual friend, that Rich Good from the Psychedelic Furs, who's a friend of mine. Also Amanda too, from the Psychedelic Furs, who are friends of mine. I am a gigantic Psychedelic Furs fan, and I am very happy because I I'm going to see them for my 30th time this year. So I'm very, very excited. So it's, I don't know, probably a terrible fanboy milestone.
That's okay.
But it was great to see that Jude is also friends with them and stuff too. So Jude, we're just so thrilled to meet you and welcome to the show.
So happy, man. I'm just for a moment going to put these on to prove that I wasn't lying about them. So there are my...
Mine are in the other room, otherwise I'd have them.
Yeah.
There was an ongoing joke about the sunglasses.
If I get the right tilt, you should be able to see your own reflections in them. I don't know if you can do that, but...
Oh, I love that.
Oh, I love that, yeah.
Mechanical special effects, you know, so... And yes, I do.
And for anyone listening... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I do indeed know the Psychedelic Furs, and I've actually... My band toured with them, and so I got to know them very, very well. But even though I've toured with them, I haven't seen them 30 times.
Yeah. Well, Rich is just such a terrific guy, and he's always been so good to me, and tolerating fans and things like that, and so good. And they had a terrible loss this year. They're so bad.
Yeah, I mean, I saw them we went to see them in Minneapolis last year, and it was the last time with Mars, you know, and because we didn't really get to hang out with them much because he was so sick at the time, so they couldn't have anybody, you know, backstage or anything. And it's been like that a few times, but I knew Mars incredibly well, and I have stories that I can tell you with them. That's not why we're here, but Mars was,
No. We'll get caught up, and you and I will talk about our great love of...
Are you coming to the show here?
First at some point.
Well, it's our excuse to all get together.
Absolutely.
They're playing in, where they're playing in Des Moines next month? They're playing here, like literally at the end of our street.
Yes, and we're coming. We're going to come and see them, so we'll see you too. So let's all get together.
Yeah.
You know, I would love that. And Amanda's a dear friend too. She was mentoring my daughter, who's a musician for a while. So she's just Amanda Kramer. For people who don't know, she's a very established musician. She's been part of many bands. But yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, we're off track, but
you should read her book if you get a chance. Anyone tuning in?
I haven't read her book. Maybe I should do that before I see her.
You should. I've got a month. So anyway, of course, Jude, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how the heck did an English boy like you end up in Iowa, and how did you get involved with film?
Well, there's several versions, there's several stories, and they're fairly long, but the short version is that I was a musician fronting a band in my teens. That was the only job I ever had after I left school. Apart from working in a frozen food store long enough to buy a guitar, you know. And when I was 18, I met Derek Jarman at Riverside Studios in London, and Derek was making the film The Garden at the time. And I was completely besotted with Derek's work because my dad had introduced me to Ken Russell's work when, in my teens. So I'd seen The Devils, and I'd seen set stuff he had done for Ken Russell. And so, and then I got to know Derek extremely well. He did a couple of videos for my band with his Super 8s, you know. And at the time, he was working a lot with Tilda Swinton before she was famous, you know. It was before she did Orlando. So, you know, people who know Derek's work will know way back, but no one else really knew until after Orlando. And there's a lot I could tell you about that era and when working with Derek, but the really cool thing is that one of his other proteges was Toya Wilcox. She was in Jubilee and The Tempest. She was Ariel in The Tempest. Yeah. And Toya is in my new film. We've kind of finally come full circle.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and
it's, Toya doesn't seem to age. There's something. Why does she not age? There's something amazing about her. I know. She's as vital as ever. It's amazing.
And she's managed to keep Robert Fripp alive as well. Yeah.
Just kind of pulling good old Robert Fripp along. They still post fantastic videos and stuff all the time, and they're just as entertaining as ever. I mean,
they're growing old disgracefully, which is the way it should be done. So, yeah.
That's the way it should.
Absolutely.
Anyway, Derek introduced me to an actor called Dudley Sutton, who you may well be aware of. Dudley was, a really big. He was in Fellini's Casanova, and he was in like so many amazing films. He worked with Joseph Losey many times, stuff like that. And Agnes Varda, he worked with her. And I met him through Derek, and then years later, when it was 2009, I'd done some kind of film stuff, amateur stuff, and just because I was interested in it. But I was very busy with the band, But then I got offered a project in 2009, which was to take part. They asked the band if we wanted to take part in a festival in Berlin to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the opening of Checkpoint Charlie, and nobody was available to do it. And I was like, I really want to be involved in this thing, but the band's not available. And then I had the idea of like making a film instead and contributing that, because then I would just do the work and send it to them, So I made a film called Albion Rising, and I did the soundtrack for it and everything. And I wanted to have like reading poetry on it, particularly William Blake and Virginia Woolf and Charlotte Mew and a few other people.
Oh, sure.
And Charlotte Mew in particular was a favorite of mine. And Ella Wheeler Wilcox was another one I wanted to use. And it was meant to be a film about transcending your own kind of walls, your own kind of inner walls, really, which is something that as artists we all have to do at some point, hopefully the sooner the better. But I thought that seemed relevant to, the metaphor of the Berlin Wall sort of stuff. So I shot some stuff in Berlin and some stuff in England and a few other places. And I actually took my dad with me to Berlin as my assistant, because I didn't know what I was doing. And I didn't have a camera. I bought a mini DV camera for like £40 on eBay, like a little Samsung secondhand Samsung mini DV camera. And then and then on my first day in the studio with Dudley, my education, my film school was me saying to Dudley, "So what would Fellini do in this situation?" or something like that. And he would tell me, I would point this £40 camera at him. And we recorded a lot of audio, and we recorded the audio in the closet, because the apartment we were in, there were like trains going by, tube trains going by every 5 minutes. So I actually crammed Dudley in a coat closet, and it was fine, And then also when I worked with him, it taught me about working with actors. It taught me about how, if I read a poem, it would sound a certain way, but if he read it, it would sound however I asked him to read it. And I can't do that. So I really understood the value of working with people who were trained to do that. And I knew a few other actors as well, because in music you just meet people, in various places. And one of the other people I had become friends with was Juliet Landau from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Martin Landau's daughter. And so I asked her to I asked her to read the Ella Wheeler Wilcox stuff in the film. And so I wound up with like several well-known people in the film, which means the next thing I knew, I have an IMDb page. And then I saw Juliet's husband in London, Deverell, and he said, "So you're a filmmaker now?" And I'm like, "Well, no." And he said, "Well, you made a film. That makes you a filmmaker." And it's like, "Oh, okay." And I had never really thought of myself as a filmmaker until somebody else told me I was. I thought I was just dabbling in film, but then it turned out really well. I really loved the film, so that was it. I was just completely sold, and all I had to do was get rid of the mini DV camera and get a real camera, and that was it, really, So, and then the other thing was that because at the time I kind of came to it seriously, I mean, I learned photography when I was a kid. My dad bought me my Praktika 35mm 1960s S, which is actually right here. I'll show it to you. 1961 East German Praktika with a Zeiss lens, and
it's fantastic.
which I got from my dad, bought it for my 9th birthday, and in 1981. And what happened was, because it was a vintage camera then, the early 80s was when all the photographers were getting all the new bayonet lenses, so the old screw thread lenses, the old 42mm lenses, were suddenly 10 a penny. They were so cheap. And so I had this amazing collection of secondhand lenses. And what's happened over the years is that people have realized that actually those lenses, that was the heyday of lens craftsmanship, because they weren't made by machine, they were all made by hand. So they're amazing lenses that were built by people who knew what they were doing and actually looked through the thing. So just by sheer luck, I got into photography at the kind of tail end of that. And because we didn't have much money, we wound up buying stuff that it turned out was better than the expensive stuff. And so when I decided to do filmmaking seriously, because I had learned photography on that camera, the first thing I did was ask, is there a camera that I can mount my old lenses on? Because every modern camera that I was seeing had these terrible plastic zoom lenses and things, and it turned out that the Canon 5D, was it Mark II, Mark III, 5D, the DSLR, that particular mount,
it's
really easy to convert to 42mm. So that's what I did. I bought a 5D.
Yeah, it can be switched. Yeah,
and I'm still using them because, I don't use autofocus anyway. Why would you want to do that on filmmaking? And with those lenses, I can get an image that's so close to the one I want to use that the post-production is a piece of cake, and no one's ever complained about the quality of the image. So I see no reason to, I'm not going to be buying an Arri Alexa any day soon. It's great because it becomes not about the tech, it becomes about the ideas, which is that's where I'm coming from. Yeah. So that's the fairly short. Yeah. That's the fairly short version of how I got into filmmaking. Quantum leap of coming to Iowa. So basically,
just gonna ask.
Basically, it starts in 1985 with a film called The Legend of Billie Jean, which was an American teen starring Helen Slater, and it was like an 80s teen movie retelling of Joan of Arc. Basically, that's what it kind of essentially is. And in the movie, she's watching another movie on TV. She sees Saint Joan, the Preminger film on TV, starring Gene Seberg. And it was the first time I ever saw Gene Seberg, and I was fascinated by that. And then I remember asking my mum, who was a great film buff, and she said, "Oh, she's in Airport and Paint Your Wagon and all these sorts of like Hollywood movies and stuff, And I saw those films, and she didn't even register really with me in those films. But then I eventually saw the actual Preminger films, Saint Joan and Bonjour Tristesse, and I thought, oh my God, she's magnificent. And I don't know how she wasn't a bigger star already, but of course, obviously, Truffaut and Goddard thought the same, and they put her in Breathless.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I've done a ton of research into this because I knew Murray Melvin, and I went to meet Sheila Delaney. So Derek's thing, part of Derek's mentorship with me was he said, if you want to know something, go to the source. So I wanted to know about screenwriting, so I went and doorstepped Sheila Delaney. When you live in London, this is actually not that difficult to do. You just find out where people live and show up, And so I had that advantage. And I met Joan Littlewood and all these people who told me these stories about Gene Seberg, Honor Blackman told me I had a really long phone call with Honor Blackman once, and she told me loads of stuff, and it was just really amazing. And so I became something of a super fan, and I had a website. And not a lot of stuff was known in English. It's all in French, So, what happened though was that meanwhile, in her hometown of Marshalltown, Iowa, there was an effort underway to rescue the old Orpheum Theatre, which was like one of the classic 1940s public theatres. And it was where she first saw Marlon Brando on screen and decided to become an actress, And the other side of it is that my research into her and meeting Murray Melvin and people like this, I learned something which wasn't widely known, which was that the reason how she got cast in Breathless, Truffaut went to see Bonjour Tristesse because he was a fan of the book, the François Sagan book. So he went to see the film, and he'd already seen her in St. Joan, so he was aware of who she was. And he was amazed with her performance in Bonjour Tristesse. And in the lobby on the way out of the theatre in Paris, he ran into François Sagan, the author. And he said, "What do you think of the film?" And she said, "The girl's amazing. I can't believe that she's managed to bring the character to life so well." And then it turned out that François Sagan had actually paid to see the film. She bought a ticket to see the film because she loved Jean's performance in it so much that she would actually pay to see her own movie, And Truffaut ran with this information to Godard. He said, "I think I've seen the girl you need for this film you want to make." And as luck would have it, at the time she was in London and she was training with Joan Littlewood, and Joan Littlewood's style of stage acting, Jean had the idea of is it possible to bring this to the screen in some way? And when Godard approached her, he said, "Look, we don't have any money. We don't have much of a script, but we'd love you to do the film." And she was like, "I'll do it on the condition that we do it this way, and on the condition that we do it entirely on location, no shonky sets, all natural light and all that stuff." And Godard had no choice but to agree. And so between them, the result of that was...
Oh my God, someone actually convinced her of something.
Yeah. And it was because he had a rising American star, he got the money. That's how he got the money. So there's no other way Breathless ever would have been made the way it was, and she deserves more credit for that input, I think, So when I got a call in the year 2000, I think it was, maybe 2002, from Nancy Adams from Marshalltown. She was coming to London and she wanted to meet me. And she had all this stuff that she thought would be fun for my website, which is a lot of stuff about Jean and Marshalltown. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And but when we met, she told me about the effort to save the theatre, the Orpheum Theatre. And she said, if there's anything you can do to help promote the cause, outside of, Iowa, because she said they don't appreciate her here. They don't know her, and they don't appreciate what huge icon she is in Europe, And she was the face that launched the French New Wave. You know what I mean? So there's no two ways about it. They still use that shot to promote film festivals all over Europe, and BFI in London used it on their program last summer. So what happened was I agreed to this. And anyway, the short version is 10 years later, I get a phone call saying, "Will you come to Marshalltown? We saved the theatre. We're reopening it with a Gene Seberg International Film Festival. So we need somebody to come from overseas to make it international. Will you please come?" So they paid for my ticket to come to Marshalltown. And of course, my experience of America before then was, the usual places like New York, LA, Chicago, Detroit, a few others, I had no experience of the Midwest in the truest sense. And when I came here, my first impression of it is, and I repeat this a lot, you probably heard me say this in other interviews, but my first impression of it, this is the sort of town where Snoopy would live. These are the backyards that I would see in cartoons like Peanuts, And so to me, and also I found
absolutely.
It was John Wayne country, and Donna Reed was from here, and quite a few of the Star Trek people, and the Twin Peaks people, and I was like, this is interesting. So I got interested in it, And so I came back every time I had a festival. I would come back. Sometimes I would be a keynote speaker. Sometimes I would just show up, And one day, 2017, I had a kind of directionless moment in my life because I lost my mother in 2016, and my dad is doing very, very well, and my dad never kind of needed me in the same way that my mother did, And so when I lost her, I suddenly had all this freedom, this like emotional freedom that I didn't have before. And obviously I was grieving, but I also realized that I have to do something with this, because then it becomes part of her legacy and part, her sort of gift to me, if I can do something with this time I now have that I would have previously given to her, And then I was on tour with the Psychedelic Furs, and got another invitation to come to Marshalltown. And my friend of mine was doing some stuff in LA, and she was like, "Come to LA." Her mother was dying. That's right, my friend Randy, and she had to go to New York, so she wanted somebody to come and look after her cat for a month in LA. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Marshalltown for the festival. Then I'm going to go and hang out in LA for a month because it's rent free, and there's a cat, and I'm doing a favor for a friend. So I didn't have anything else to do because the tour was over, And then what happened was that when I was in Marshalltown, I had this idea for a story, but I didn't have a setting for it. And it was sort of in the back of my mind, but it wasn't anything that I was really developing. And then it just hit me that Marshalltown was the perfect location for this story. It has the same kind of Midwestern sort of thing as It's a Wonderful Life and those kind of classic small town stories. And what I love about the small town thing as well is that it's you can tell quite a rich story on quite a big tapestry in a place like Iowa, because even though you have huge open landscapes, there's nobody in it. You know what I mean? So the emptiness brings with it a sort of weird claustrophobia. So you get the best of both worlds. It's both cinematic and claustrophobic at the same time, So I had this, it was the perfect setting for the story. So then my plan became do all the pre-production and stuff in London, and then go and shoot on location in Iowa, and then come back and do the edit and stuff in London. But, life doesn't work like that. And so what happened was that my very dear friend, Moon Chaplin, whose painting is right above my head here, she passed away in 2019. And I came over just because I wanted to be around people who knew her, and nobody in London knew her. She was from here, And then so I just came and hung out, and then there was a lot of business problems going on with studios and stuff back in London, and I was getting really tired of it all. And I reached a point where I was like, if I'm going to start again, I need to do it now while I still have the strength to deal with it, because it's not easy starting all over again. And then the smallest thing, I when I was in LA after that trip, I started writing the screenplay. I wrote a treatment, and I had coffee with Juliet Landau, and I said, "Would you do the film if I write it for you?" And she said, "Yeah," because she really liked the story. So I was in LA with a project. And it's the weirdest thing, because usually people go to LA to try and get involved in a film, whereas I showed up with one already on the boil, And the very first meeting I had so many positive meetings with people while I was out there that I thought, you know what, maybe this could work, this relocation stuff, And so I started seriously thinking about that as an option. And then to cut a long story short, there will be, through a number of business things that were, London's a really expensive place to exist, and I realized that, maybe it could work. Maybe it's bold enough that it could work, Iowa of all places, but, so I committed myself to it, and came over with the intention of making the film. Arrived like sort of my flight over. When I arrived at JFK, the in-flight movie was Contagion. And when I arrived at JFK, they were asking if you'd been to Wuhan recently, could you join another queue over here? And I was like, something weird's going on. Well, I'm not quite sure what it is, And then, I flew out to Des Moines from New York the following week.
Sure.
And, so we're so many sort of little serendipitous things, but the thing that really decided that this was the right thing to do, when I was working on the screenplay for Little Johnny Jewel, there was a plot problem. You know when you get how do I get the story from this point to this point? I need a little plot device to help me move it, and I couldn't come up with anything. And then one day I went into the Salvation Army, the thrift store, and for 50 cents, they had this vintage red suitcase. And it suddenly hit me. Suitcase. We have the suitcase in the start of the movie, and then it disappears, but it shows up much, much later in the movie with the clue in it that they need that unlocks the whole, you know what I mean? And it was 50 cents to buy this suitcase. But it changed my life, because what I realized is that I would never have come up with that in a million years if I hadn't been there. If I'd been in London, I'd never have thought of that. And it's so simple, but sometimes it's the simple things that you need that moment of inspiration, because they're kind of too easy, But when I read and I realized, no, I need to physically be here to do this. So all my plans changed, and I just decided that I was just gonna come. And so the night I arrived in New York, this time, I'm a filmmaker now. I'm no longer a musician. I'm a filmmaker. So I get there, I get into JFK, and I get the train into Manhattan, and it was one of those late night. I don't know how well if either of you know New York, but so the late night trains are all express trains, and they only stop at a certain number of stations. They don't stop at every station. Mm-hmm. And of course, I was just a little bit too late to get the train that stopped where I needed to go. So I wound up on this express train, which took me all the way up to 115th Street in Harlem, which is not where I wanted to be at 1 o'clock in the morning with my luggage, And and so I'm in the station, and there's one other human being in there, and it's this guy, and he stinks of alcohol and meth, and he's pushing all his worldly belongings around in a beaten up old shopping cart. And he wanders over to me, and he said, "You look lost." And I have no choice but to ask this guy for help, because I do not know how to get to the platform to get to where I actually want to be, and I don't want to mess around in Harlem too long. And I said, "Do you know how to get to 103rd Street?" He said, "Yeah, I'll take you there." So he takes me to the platform, and he's like, "You're not from around here, are you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm from England." And he goes, "What are you doing? So what brings you here?" And I said, "I'm on my way to Iowa." "Iowa? What are you going to Iowa for?" "I'm a filmmaker." And it's the first time I'd ever described myself to a new person as a filmmaker. I decided to own it in that moment. And he said, "I used to be in the film business in England in the 1980s. And I'm like, and it turned out that he used to work for Neil Jordan and Stephen Woolley, and had worked on, Mona Lisa and Company of Wolves and all those films they did in the mid-80s, High Spirits, all that stuff. He worked on all these films. Yeah. And then he had fallen on hard times to come to New York, where he's from, And he'd worked with Richard Stanley, who's one of my favorite filmmakers in the world. He knew all these people. And this is the weirdest thing, that this guy, who's literally just pushing his stuff around, knew all this stuff. And I said, "I've actually been to Stephen Woolley's office, because when I was working with Juliet, we did an interview with him for something." And he says to me, "Does he still have that stupid stuffed wolf at the top of his staircase?" I said, "He does. Yes, he does. Yeah." And I knew he was for real, because a detail like that, you can't make that up. Yeah. So the very first person I met was, and then he said to me, as I was getting on the train, he said, "Iowa, yeah?" And he said, "That's that could actually work. And with that, I was
That's
gone.
awesome.
That was
that.
That was like my first. And then, and the other thing is that I don't know if you're familiar with the band Babes in Toyland, but they had an album called,
oh, absolutely, I am.
Yeah. So they had an album called Fontanelle. And on the flight from LaGuardia to Des Moines, I was listening to Fontanelle on my headphones. And I get to Des Moines, and my ride arrives to take me to where I'm staying that night. And where I'm staying is in the East Village, in an apartment above a store called Fontanelle on that corner. And I had never heard the word before.
Wow.
In the album on that evening, I'd never heard that word. And now it's staring me in the face, and I'm, and then, I don't know, all kinds of stuff just happened, Like I broke the toilet in the apartment, and it was a Sunday. And one of my hosts is in a wheelchair, and I'm thinking, I've got to sort this out. I can't, I need to fix this. This is a big problem. Where am I going to get a plumber on a Sunday? And I walked out the door, and less than half a block down the street, and I turn around, and it's like the American Plumbing Supply store. It's right opposite Raygun on Grand Avenue, and he was open on a Sunday, and he loaned me the equipment that I needed. He didn't even charge me, and everything was fixed. And I came away from there thinking, this is going to work. This Iowa thing is going to work.
It's a lot of serendipity.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and also because if you get someone to write about you in like Time Out in London or New York or one of those big arts magazines, that's all well and good. But you walk down the street in like West Kensington or Chelsea or Manhattan or anything, and people still don't know who you are. Whereas if you get an article in the Times in Marshalltown, and then you're doing the drive-through at Arby's, they're like, "Hey, are you that English filmmaker guy?"
Yep.
I read about you in the paper. and it was like being a big fish in a small pond, and it was like if you're in LA or LA, New York, London, wherever, and you say, "I'm a filmmaker," it's like, well, join the queue, But you come to Iowa and suddenly it's like, that's really interesting. How can we help? And
absolutely.
This has been consistently my experience, I have many, many, many examples of things.
That's a really good thing because
Sorry, Shelby, I cut you off there.
Yeah, that actually. No, it flows perfectly into the next question because we were wondering, because obviously you're not born in Iowa, you weren't raised here, and oftentimes people that are making films here are born and raised in the area.
Right.
I was wondering kind of what has been your perspective, coming from, a place outside of Iowa. What has been your perspective coming here, creating films, working within this industry in Iowa? Has it been supportive? Do you think there are ways that maybe we could do better? What has been your experience?
That is a very interesting question, and I will answer it as honestly as I can. And I ask people to remember that I'm not from Iowa, so I don't always do Iowa nice. You can take the boy out of London, but you can't take London out of the boy. So the good stuff is the really important stuff. I have met the most amazing, talented people that I've ever worked with here. And, the people that I work with, I would not give them up for a Hollywood A-list. There's no way I would trade any of the people that I work with for the biggest stars in the world because they are better. I'm telling you, they are better. And I don't know if you had a chance to see Mania, but, if you're trying to get an established actor to do what Avery did in that film, would be virtually impossible because of unionization and and the risks that you can take when you're indie. Like we're just going to keep the camera on her the whole time. By keeping it small, you can take huge risks and you can actually change the form. You can push things further than you ever could before in any other way. And because all we need is the camera and the talent and the will to do it. That's all you need, And yes, and when I came here and I found the talent, and I already had the camera and the will to do it. But I don't think of myself as an Iowa filmmaker. I think of myself now as a filmmaker based in Iowa, because Iowa is a good place to be based because we have incredible talent. It's way cheaper here, even without the tax incentives. It's cheaper to make films here, and, we have good light. We've got plenty of space. There's nothing that we're missing, that you need. I don't really. So I feel like I'm international as a filmmaker. I'm going to London on Sunday, and we're going to be shooting some stuff in the UK, like for the next film. Even though the rest of it's it's still based in Iowa. But, and we did obviously Mania. A chunk of Mania was filmed in New York, so I don't feel like we have to be in Iowa. But the business is based in Iowa, and so mostly we will work here because it's easier. But funding can be really difficult. That's a really difficult thing to find. People in this part of America don't have the same amount of disposable income as they have in richer cities like LA and New York, But then again, there's fewer people competing for it as well. So, and and the other thing is that one of the things that's very different in the culture that I'm from is that, we don't have commercials on everything. We have the BBC, which has no commercials, stuff like that. So I struggle to get my head around something that people here find very easy, which is like, I'll go and do a Hy-Vee commercial and make some money that way, or or they'll dip their toe into, I know Shelby's been talking about branding and stuff recently. And it's like, and I understand that, but my own experience, that's not my area, and I know what my area is. And so, for example, I want us to have our own theatre. I went to look at a building today, actually, and I've met a guy who might be able to help us find something. But I want a theatre that shows art house films, European films, classic American films, without compromising, without having to show Jurassic Park 12, whatever it is, without having to buy into the blockbusters just to pay the rent. I don't want to do that. I want something that's completely arts based, and therefore, if need be, we just apply for funding all the time. Because the thing about arts is it needs to be funded properly. And because anyone who works in it for any length of time, and I say this over and over, and this is where the Iowa nice thing kind of escapes me. But the bottom line is that wherever you go in the world, and that includes here, the people with money have no vision, and the people with vision have no money. And so what you have to try and do is bring them together in a spirit of collaboration, which is not easy because, a lot of people, the reason they have the money is because they've been trained to want a return. And it's like, when you create something out of passion, out of love, out of inspiration, you can't guarantee a return. It's that simple. So
for sure.
And the reason independent movies exist was as an alternative to that. So John Cassavetes didn't make his films to compete with Star Wars. That wasn't what he was trying to do. And
no.
So we need this second industry that just lets us be and just lets us do stuff, and lets us play and see what we can come up with, because otherwise nothing else progresses. It's only when those ideas feed back into the mainstream that there's any progress at all. So nobody in the mainstream is ever going to take that chance. So, when it comes to creativity, when it comes to the arts, you cannot legislate for ideas in the same way that you can for everything else, and the idea that you can't do another take because it's time for the coffee break, or this sort of thing. These little things that interrupt the flow, it's like they do not seem to understand as an artist. If something interrupts your flow, it takes time to get back to where you were. You can't just pick it right up exactly where you were. Creative energy, it's a fragile thing. It's a fickle thing. It's not always there when you need it, and so it's like the ability to, empathize with that. And what I love, so the film I'm working on right now, I'm working on another film with Emily Kincaid called Isolation. And the plan is to, I won't go into what the film's about because it's too complicated. The plan is to have live music accompaniment with it that's improvised. So no two screenings.
Oh, sure.
Same. It changes every time you see it. And it's really difficult to get this across, to explain this or get this across. But you have more chance of doing it with real artists than you do going to somebody who watches, Netflix all day long. Because, I'm not criticizing that. Well, I could criticize Netflix, but I'm not going to. But the point is that, when you know what you're about, you know what your area is, and within that you can do whatever you need to do. But I find it difficult to compromise, really difficult to compromise. So if somebody came to me and said, we'll give you $10,000 to do a Hy-Vee ad, the idea that would be easy money is actually, it wouldn't be for me, because I think that that's a special kind of skill that I don't possess, and it would be. So it's easy for me to write the grant than it is to make that kind of, concession. But anyway, I'm rambling, but there you go.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
But in terms of could we do more?
We've been.
We could do more. One of the things that I've been advocating for.
We've been watching.
Sorry, Mike.
Sure. No, it's all right. No, you're fine. We've been watching Mania, and I think it's a fascinating film. I want to talk a little bit about the two themes that are really kind of evident to me, which are like maybe narcissism, probably.
Yeah.
Codependency, maybe.
Yeah, because we noticed in one of your interviews that you mentioned, it was in the Times.
Oh, sure.
Republic of it's an exploration of narcissism and codependency.
Yeah, would you talk on that a little bit for us, because thematically those are interesting themes.
Well, I actually wrote the original screenplay like years ago, like 10 years ago. I was going to set it in London and Cornwall, but certain things transpired, and I didn't proceed with the project. And then when I met Rob Merritt, I finally thought I've met someone who could play the psychiatrist, so I resurrected it and just changed it to New York and Iowa so I could make it here. So the thing about you are correct that those are essentially the themes. So what you have is the overt narcissist mother. She's the grandiose one. She's the one who, it's quite a difficult thing to do in a film. It's a very brave performance by Patricia O'Neill, because she has the task of establishing that in a very, very early on in the film, and it might appear in the first scene where you see her, it might appear that she's overacting until you learn what this character actually is. And then you learn, oh yeah, she is on all the time. That's her thing, and then suddenly that early scene makes a lot of sense later on, and it's funny because I've seen people like respond to scenes and they'll say the grieving mother, and then later on they realize, oh no, she wasn't the grieving mother, she's this toxic evil monster, and and then of course what happens is that the daughter Dandy is the classic exploding doormat codependent, and so she,
for sure,
her escape route from the mother is the man, but he turns out to be a covert narcissist, which is even worse, and so his motivation. This is the really interesting thing about it. His motivation, because people are always looking for that in films. It's like, why is he doing these things? Why is he why is he playing these games with these people? He doesn't seem to gain anything from it. What's in it for him? It's like, it's the sheer bliss of being evil, you know? And I became fascinated with codependency because I had, I'm a recovering codependent myself, so I think most sane people are, you know? I believe that codependency and narcissism is a spectrum, you know, and that we're all somewhere on the spectrum. And the closer you are to the middle, the healthier you are, you know. The problem with narcissism is that they will never admit that they're the one with the problem. At least if you're at the other end, you've got a chance to get better because you can be self-analytical. You're already self-critical.
Right.
And it's a really kind of interesting subject. I also believe that narcissism is the world's #1 public health problem. It always reminds me, the Voight-Kampff test in Blade Runner. You know, when they're testing, it's the empathy test. You know, so Eric Byrne came up with that in the 1960s, and he was friends with And Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Author.
Ridley Scott?
No, the author of the book.
Yes.
I can't remember his name.
It's escaping me right now.
I can't believe I can't remember his name, but the book is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. And he became fascinated with this test that you could do, the empathy test. And of course, in the film, they use it to identify androids, but actually it was designed to identify narcissism. And they still use something similar in the modern DSM, you know, and they've refined it a lot now. But it basically comes down to the same thing: is that you can test to see if somebody has any empathy, and if they don't, then in Blade Runner they shoot them, they retire them immediately, you know, because they're a danger to everybody else, you know, because they're entirely self-serving, and it's like, how do we not realize that that's actually what happens to people, you know, when we elevate them like that? And it's, I can remember seeing when the revolution happened in Libya, there was a former head of MI6 or MI5, I think it was MI6, was on Newsnight on the BBC, talking about how sorry he was that Gaddafi had been killed, because now he wouldn't be able to face charges for his crimes and then spend the rest of his life in a cell somewhere contemplating what he had done. And I was like, how can the head of MI6 be that dumb? You know what I mean? How can the head of MI6 not be aware that, like, no, dictator's a narcissist. He's just going to spend the rest of his life walking around his cell telling himself how right he was, you know? And it's like that scene at the end of Downfall, you know, the Hitler story, when Albert Speer finally gets through to Hitler and he finally realizes that the war is lost. And his response is, the German people deserve their fate because they didn't love me enough. They didn't fight hard enough for me. And that was his response to it. And that's when Speer was like, okay, we've been working for a lunatic this whole time, you know? And, and it's like, the fact that we're still dealing with this in especially in politics is kind of unbelievable to me, really, you know? And, so anything that puts the message out there, anything that helps raise awareness of these toxic people, I think is a useful endeavor, which is one of the reasons I made the film.
Well, I mean, let's hope. let's hope for people get that message. Yes. We ask ourselves these questions all the time, like, how can people believe this? How can people be going along with this? And I don't know, hopefully through art we can try to rectify something.
And I think that's something that's really shown well in this film within these themes.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I do wonder, you know, I think kind of coming in, well, where can people watch the film if they haven't seen it already? And what is it also beyond, you know, kind of the discussion we were having? What would you really hope that the audience takes away from the film?
I prefer not to get involved in the audience's, you know, perception, just because I think it's absolutely okay that they take whatever they want, you know. If they take anything at all, I consider that, you know, a huge positive. And we had a screening at the Fleur last week, and people were definitely responding emotionally to the film, and I think that the film contains some pretty intense stuff, and that hopefully it's a good commercial for low budget independent filmmaking as well, because I believe that because we don't answer to anybody when we make our films, we have a duty to go as far as we can,
right?
To never hold back and to put everything we can into the film, let it explore everything, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to explain everything. So, one of the things that I feel about life is that when I was really young, I thought that if I lived long enough, I would have some answers to life's questions. But all that's actually happened is that I've become much more comfortable with not having them. I find it easier to live with not having the answers than I used to. So, it's not my job to tell the audience what to think or to even try and lead them to anything. Either they get it or they don't. And people who, Truman Capote said, never lose a pulse beat over people who don't get it. The audience are the people who do get it. The other people are not the audience, and it doesn't really matter what they think.
Right.
And the people who do get it will have their own take on it. So, and I feel like that applies to everything, really, that right down to food.
Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's completely different.
Which we talk about a lot on
which we talk about all the time on the show. Jude, it's so awesome to have had you on the show, and we can't wait to see you. Maybe we'll try to catch up when we get that way to go see the psychedelic verse. It'd be wonderful to see you and stuff, and actually shake your hand in person instead of meeting in this very cold, very virtual way.
Yes.
But it's been an absolute delight. So, thank you for being on the show.
You're welcome.
For everyone, please come back and see us in a couple of weeks on the Depth of Field podcast. And Jude, thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Depth of Field, and check us out on YouTube and Spotify, where we post new episodes every 2 weeks.